how do we become in tune with spirits?
Well, so you could say like that's the process that you're recommending is for your governing spirit to behold the throne of God,
Yes.
and that's the necessary thing in order for you to write sacred
But
music.
how do you accomplish that? And I think the only way you accomplish that is by you yourself beholding the throne of
Yeah,
God.
right.
And like I think that is a lot of what's going on in John's vision. It's like he's there beholding the throne of God, but so is the entire host of saints and angels.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like his vision is like he becomes in tune with that. And like he even starts off his vision by pointing that out. It's like I had this vision because I was in the spirit on the Lord's day.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was already participating in this, and then I got a glimpse of what I was participating in.
Well, we don't have Aaron Beachy with us today. He's usually the one that introduces us, so you're not going to find out which one of us is David Baylor and which one is John Baylor. We're going to talk to you a little today about music, and I guess the thesis is that modern people can't write good music.
That is, I mean, it is true. Yeah, like if you're just trying to write music and you're a modern person, I mean, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. So I'm a very modern person.
What?
Yeah, and I write lots of music,
Ooh.
and I've spent a lot of my adult life as a professional performing musician. Usually playing other people's songs, although I've performed original music more than most people have. And I'll tell you a little bit about my process for writing music. There'll be an idea that will kind of come into my head, and I don't really know where it comes from, and like I don't really sense it developing or anything. But I'll eventually I'll just notice like, oh, I've been sort of playing with a musical line in my head. And then when it comes time to like sit down and write it, then I'll kind of work with that original idea. And what I'll try to do is I'll try to come up with something that's like kind of cool and interesting, and people will say, "Oh, that's cool and interesting," and will make people feel a certain way.
Yeah. Well, you are in fact a very modern person.
Why is that an insult?
I'll let you decide.
Mm-hmm.
No, but I guess like this gets at kind of part of the point I would like to make when talking about music is that is actually a surprisingly modern sensibility. Like it's not that nobody in the past would have ever like really been enamored by this musical passage and played around with it. Like obviously like somebody like Bach does that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like he just has really enamored by the
Why, thank you.
way this sounds. So that in itself isn't the problem, but what is the problem is that we today, it's like we value aesthetics for its own sake. Like the whole point is that this sounds really cool, or
Mm-hmm.
this sounds really good, or I like the way this music makes me feel, and like, so it is kind of this art for art's sake, beauty for beauty's sake, kind of thinking that's really a product of the Romantic, and not congruent with the medieval or the ancient world, or really with Christianity, like with the Christian way of framing the world. I think like as an Orthodox Christian, you would say like that lens like that leans far too much towards like this almost like this kind of hedonism, where it's like what you're concerned about is your body, like not that your body's evil, but it's just like you're just like serving the pleasures of the flesh, and like that's your motivation.
So you mentioned you used the word romantic there, and I'll just kind of define that a little bit for people. You might say like the goal of the romantic artist or musician of any kind is to get people to feel a certain way, and the art is successful if it makes them feel a certain way, and people will hold on to that piece of music forever. Like you'll cherish it forever if it makes you feel that certain way. And it might not be a good way. It might be like, oh man, this totally expressed what it is like to have your heart broken. This totally, I mean, it could be like this totally expresses what it's like to be frustrated with your job,
Mm-hmm.
or something like that. So it doesn't have to be a positive emotion. It could be a very, very negative emotion. But if it expresses it really well, then you say like, well, this is truth.
Yeah.
This is emotional truth, and like for the rest of my life, I'm going to use this in order to, well, maybe you could just say in order to understand myself. But we cherish it because it's made us feel an emotion of some kind.
Uh-huh.
You might say that the alternative approach, maybe you could say the alternative approach would be that you have music or art that helps you to focus your attention on something that is worthy of your attention.
Mm-hmm.
It was Bach that said that the purpose, the end of music, is the glory of God and the refreshing of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're focusing on God through His music. So like your attention is directed toward the thing it should be directed on. And traditional music is not always religious, or like religious in the narrow sense of the word. Anyways, I guess actually in a broad sense, maybe it always is religious actually.
Mm-hmm.
But it may be like. A lot of traditional poetry or music. I mean, traditional poetry is music, but a lot of traditional music is like an invitation into the community, and so you could think of it as like this is a way traditional art gets you to lift your focus off of yourself and off of your own emotional experience and onto everything else that actually matters in the world.
Yeah.
And engage in it and be a part of it. I actually, when I, talking with poetry with my students, I would kind of make this point that that modern literature is very focused on trying to understand emotions and like what is going on inside of a person, and yet it is very emotionless. And the narrator doesn't care about the bad things that happen to the narrator doesn't care about the bad things that happen to the characters. The narrator does not celebrate when good things happen to the characters. They're just making these like scientific observations.
Yeah.
And that moves beyond the romantic into like late 1800s, early 1900s. I mean, that's still romantic in a sense, but that's not the way writers would have done in the late 1700s or early 1800s.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's what we wind up with now, and so it's like obsessed with human emotion and human internal experience, and yet is at the same time cut off from actually experiencing emotions.
Yeah.
And traditional art is kind of the opposite. It's like traditional art is a celebration.
Right.
You're like in traditional art, you are experiencing the emotions, but it's like you're totally unaware of them. You're not looking at them. You're not trying to understand them. You're looking at what's out here. You're looking at the community, and you're trying to be a part of that.
Yeah. And so it's what I'm particularly interested in this conversation is how this applies to like sacred music, to church music, because like a lot of what you are describing is kind of like the distinction also between unorthodox or Catholic or
we should just say traditional.
Yeah, traditional. I was going to say a traditional high church form of liturgical worship.
I mean, I think you could also say a traditional low church, but
I would disagree.
Okay.
But we'll get to that.
I mean, I just think if I
would
say traditional,
I don't think you know quite the point I'm actually making.
Okay.
So like we have this distinction between a liturgical form of worship and a non-liturgical form of worship, which is similar to what you're saying, but like in a liturgical form of worship, the focus is on participation in something higher.
Yeah.
And like entering into like this eternal sense of timelessness.
Yeah.
Which is like the reason I disagree. Like any traditional form of worship, like I don't think that's what John Calvin had in mind.
Yeah.
When he was structuring Reformed worship.
Yeah.
I
said traditional low church, I have something different in mind than say like something that would have been created by reformers. I have in mind instead something that arises from folk tradition.
Yeah. Okay. Then we're making a different distinction.
Yeah.
Because I'm comparing a liturgical worship a liturgical form of worship to a non-liturgical form
Yeah.
of worship. Um, so it's like the non-liturgical form of worship, like those Protestant ideas, like I think are the things that lead ultimately to Romanticism. So it's like even like Bach, he's a Protestant, but he's a Lutheran,
Mm-hmm.
and he's also like a very liturgically minded Lutheran.
Yeah.
I mean, like he's writing masses all the time.
Yeah.
Like basically, like the overwhelming majority of everything that he wrote was for a religious service,
Yeah.
but like according to the Lutheran calendar.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it's fitting within this liturgical cycle.
Yeah, right.
So
And
it's
you
like
know, I
this-
mentioned like participating in the life of the community, but like participating in the liturgical cycle is like
Yeah.
that's related to community, but it is participation in something beyond yourself.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean it's still a form of participation that traditional art invites you into,
Uh-huh.
and modern art does not.
But we as modern people just have a sense of music and aesthetics that's so thoroughly modern that like what you started off with at the beginning is a good illustration, because you hear something and what you value in this is that it sounds really nice.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds really neat. It sounds really cool, or like this makes me feel like I'm worshiping when I hear this song.
Yeah.
It's like, but that's not. Like I don't think that's what somebody 1,000 years ago would have valued.
Yeah.
Like again, it's not to say that the aesthetics are not important at all. It's just we've made it aesthetics for the sake of aesthetics.
Yeah. Well, you know, I sort of, when I was talking about like traditional versus modern poetry or literature, then I said like the modern stuff is obsessed with the emotion, and the ancient and medieval literature is like unaware that emotion actually even exists.
Right.
But it's actually way more emotionally engaged.
Yeah.
And it's like you might think of music that's trying to stir up emotion as being like similar to a masochist who like tries to harm himself so that he knows he's still alive.
Mm-hmm.
It would be way better to be unaware that you have emotions than to say like, okay, I'm going to force an emotion on myself so that I can feel like I'm alive.
Yeah.
When you say you want to apply it to sacred music, then you can see in contemporary music, contemporary Christian music, like this very strong goal of feeling a certain way. And the music is trying to do that, but if you're in the worship service and you're singing along with the praise band, then you have a goal within yourself to feel a certain way.
Right.
I'm trying to get into a certain emotional state.
Yeah, which is like a criticism that Orthodox have very frequently of like modern Protestant style of worship. Is like this is all about the way you feel and all about evoking certain emotions. And like I guess what I'm interested in exploring is there a degree in which we might make that same mistake with our musical preferences? Like, are we still kind of clinging on to a bit of that way of thinking and expressing it in our liturgical practices through the kind of music and the way that we choose the kind of music and the reasons and motivations for the music that we use? And like I would even ask the question is the 19th century Russian music that we use so much in Orthodox churches in America maybe actually a little bit too informed by these romantic sensibilities? Like especially if you're talking about like Tchaikovsky. We don't use his stuff a ton, but we do use it some. But he's like the foremost romantic composer, and he's writing liturgical music.
Yeah.
And we have all this like imperial Russian court music that like is really reminiscent of like German music, that its aim and focus seems to be grand.
Yeah.
Like it is very beautiful, like don't get me wrong, and I'm not saying we need to stop using that because it was written with the wrong ideas. More I'm just trying to explore this idea of how do we write music?
Yeah.
And how is there a difference between how we wrote music in the 19th century and the 20th century and today compared to how the great composers of 1,000 years ago wrote, wrote music, whether in the East or the West.
Yeah.
Or anybody in the ancient world.
Right.
And I think that there is.
As I was defining like this sort of classical or traditional aim of music, then I said it focuses your attention on what it should be focused on. It invites you to participation in something beyond yourself or above yourself. And then I think I can also add to that, and I kind of relate to the Bach quote that I kind of butchered earlier.
Yeah.
But its goal is like by participating in this, you are seeking proper order for your own self. And so like whatever is disjointed within you, it moves into its proper place, and that includes participation in the community, because properly you are not an isolated individual. Properly you are part of things bigger than yourself, and traditional music invites you into that. So those are kind of my ways of defining it, like focusing your attention on the proper place, writing whatever is wrong within you, and then oh boy, I've already forgotten what the the third one thing was that I just said. Oh yeah, just the participation.
Yeah.
So those, like I say, those are kind of the main goals in my mind.
Right. So then that raises the question: if I am a composer of music, and let's say I'm writing music, I'm trying to write this new beautiful setting for the Divine Liturgy as an Orthodox Christian, how do I do that? Like, how do I actually accomplish those goals?
Yeah.
And like I think that's the question, because I've seen a lot of people discussing this matter and recognizing, okay, there is a distinction between how we write music today and how people in the past wrote, like the difference in goals like you discussed just now. But the question in my mind is, okay, how do I actually write music that accomplishes those goals? And my intuition is that if I try to do that, like if I am deliberate and overt in my motivation and I'm trying to write music that does that, I'm not going to accomplish that, because I don't think that's how you actually do it. And so a way to illustrate that is to step back and say, okay, so people can examine the Hebrew text of the Old Testament, or even the Greek text of the New Testament or the Old Testament, and see like this recurrence of numbers throughout the text, and like this, like not only the overt use of numbers, but how like numbers are subtly used in the text, like the value of names and like the number of words in a certain passage, or things like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think when you're looking at that you're believing that the author of that book sat back and like plotted this all out. It's like, okay, I've got to use 27 letters here, so let's make sure, and like really thoroughly planned this out. But rather, it was a meditative act. Like because he was meditating on these principles, that these reflected themselves in his work. And like I've heard people examine like Bach's music and see how like there's like this Trinitarian structure to Bach's sacred music, and there's like this sacred structure and all of these like really subtle little references going on. And it's like, I don't think that he was like trying to be in your face about these things and really on the nose about these things. And, and it was like really trying to be meticulous about all of these things. I think these things happen because like I don't know, you could say you're almost obsessed with these concepts. And so like they're thoroughly embedded in your mind. And in the same sense, like if you examine Byzantine music or any medieval music, then you can see these patterns emerge. I don't have any examples off the top of my head, but there's patterns to things, and like patterns that like represent theological and philosophical concepts that were important to the authors, like um, the music of the spheres and the use of certain like intervals and um, like metric structures and things like that that like suggest some like subtly suggest some sort of theological concept and how things relate to each other. And it's like I don't think people are being again really on the nose and in your face about those things. And the reason I say all that is because I think it's the same thing when you're talking about these goals and these motivations, that if I sit here and make it my goal, I'm going to write music that does this and this and this and this and this, that I'm probably not going to accomplish that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I personally am not there.
Yeah.
And so I think my thesis is if we want to write sacred music that accomplish these things in the same way that the great ancient works and medieval works did, then we've got to be obsessed, basically. Like it has to be a meditative act, not an intellectual one.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is not an intellectual pursuit. And like instead of like making it your goal to write something that's really beautiful and really grand and majestic, or something like, instead of making it my goal, like I'm gonna write something that really takes you to heaven when you hear this song. It's like you might get close, but what's probably better is if you are yourself in heaven when you're writing it.
Yeah. Yeah, so just a couple of those things. Some of those comments you made seem like there is a conscious element in somebody writing those things.
Yeah, and I suppose my distinction is what the conscious element actually is.
Yeah.
And saying like, you might think it's this, but I don't. I think it's actually this.
Right. And I think I wish I could think of an example of an octave leap in the Messiah. And the octave leap was, there's a specific example that should be coming to my mind, but like representative of like the grandeur and omnipotence of God, like this great expanse that you're covering with this one motion. And so it's like, it sounds like this very, very intellectual idea. Or there's like by man came also the resurrection of the dead, where you like on resurrection, where you're going up on this word resurrection as you go through this, something like that. Like to ascribe that to like a pure conscious decision seems to me like that can't quite be right.
Right.
Some of it is just like, here's the text, because Handel's given the text.
Well,
and he's setting it to music, and like I'm meditating on this text, and I'm writing what I hear. Like I'm not like turning this into a science experiment, or I'm not doing like, okay, here's my intellectual ideas I'm going to try to cram into this. Here I want to represent God's omnipotence, and here I want, since it's the word resurrection, I want rising on this. Instead, like I'm meditating on this, and I will hear bits of music that are correct.
Yeah.
And I will hear bits of music that aren't correct.
Well, so ancient people were aware that the best sounding musical intervals have the same numeric ratio as like the orbits of the planets.
Mm-hmm.
Like in from the perspective of the Earth.
Yeah.
So like 3 to 2, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't see that as coincidence.
Yeah, right.
Like they thought like there's this divine harmonic pattern, and like those patterns also exist in beat form.
Mm-hmm.
And, like there's this theory that harmony is just tempo sped up,
Mm-hmm.
like just a beat pattern sped up, because
Yeah,
it is actually.
right. Yeah.
Like it literally is.
Mm-hmm.
But like so people knew these things. Like the ancient Greeks mapped this all out, like the Babylonians mapped out the astronomical things, and the ancient Greeks figured out the musical things. Like it might have been figured out before Pythagoras,
Mm-hmm.
but we know at least Pythagoras knew the intervals and how they function.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really not that hard to figure out if you have a stringed instrument.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, if you have the work that's already done for you, then it's easy to figure out.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, he was very much interested in those ratios between notes.
yeah,
Pythagoras, we also anything that's credited to Pythagoras is like, well, maybe it came from him, maybe it came from somebody in his school, or
Right.
maybe it was older.
right.
Like we don't really know, but
It just came through the Pythagorean school. Is all
Yeah,
we really know
right.
for sure.
one thing we attribute to Pythagoras, and this is kind of related to that, the word cosmos basically means order, and it could be used to like describe patterns of military troops. We have the word cosmetics, which comes from the same root, and so like if you're doing like cosmetic surgery, or you're just applying cosmetics, like then you're like trying to properly order your face, and so the word just refers to an order, and we credit Pythagoras with taking the word cosmos and applying it to the order of the universe.
Yeah,
And that relates very much to like the order of the universe and the order of music, like operating according to the same principles.
right.
Because music is, it's part of the same universe. It's just a different expression of the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and so like I think, to use Aristotelian terminology, that somebody in the ancient world would have understood that if you want to write music that accomplishes these goals, you have to be in tune with the music of the spheres.
Right.
And, and if I'm rephrasing that in like patristic Christian terminology, like they might still, especially medieval people in the West, use the language of the music of the spheres.
Yeah.
But probably a more appropriate way of framing it for a Christian is your noetic capacities, your noetic faculties are attuned to God, are attuned to heaven, which means like your receptive intellect is receiving from heaven, like is the mind of your soul is like how I think it's Saint Ephraim speaks of it.
Yeah.
It's like it's looking to God, and like that's like I think if you want to write church music, if you want to write sacred music, it has to be in that capacity. Like it has to be beholding the throne of God.
Yeah.
And like you're in tune with this, and so like the music that you're writing has to be the music of heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the music of heaven might, how should I say this? The music of heaven is something that is like higher than human capacity, and so different people beholding the throne are not like, they're not going to all write the same song.
Yeah, I heard about this Japanese swordsmith or samurai or somebody who was who had a sword that he was commissioned to make, and in preparation for making the sword, he went and spent 100 days meditating underneath a waterfall, and then he was ready to make the sword.
Yeah.
And the sword is not just a tool for killing people, but like you have a relationship with the sword, and this is like, and it's a symbol of your authority. I mean, not just a tool for getting the job done, but like it does represent who you are.
Right.
And so this is a sacred thing, and so in order to create it, you're going to spend 100 days meditating in like this place of transcendent natural beauty. And I mean, you might say like, how much more sacred music, that in order to do this, your process would be first, I need to be right.
Yeah.
I need to set my own soul right. I need to have my own focus and attention in the proper place, and then I can be receptive in the way that you must be to write music.
And I think like an important concept is not seeing yourself as the author.
Yeah.
which is something you're going to universally find in the Christian world, in the pagan world, whatever world you're looking at,
Mhm.
is that you're a conduit.
You
And
you
like
will see this in modern artists. You won't see this as like an understanding of how this is the process, how the process works, or how it should work, but you will hear people who will say like, "Hey, this was my best work that I ever did. This one right here, and I feel like I didn't even write it.
Yeah.
I felt like all the other songs that I wrote, I was writing them, but this one I felt like I'm not the author."
Yeah, I mean,
You know?
and you also have a lot of people that feel like they're channeling
Yeah,
something.
right,
Like maybe it's some kind of cosmic force they're channeling
Yeah,
or something, or like they're a conduit,
yeah,
or they're inspired to do this.
Yeah.
Like they mean that, like in
Yeah.
the sense of like
right,
I like the universe is speaking through
Mhm.
me. It's like, well, you probably are channeling something, but there's a pretty good chance it's demonic.
um, Bob Dylan said that he worked hard at his songwriting, but some of his early songs were just magic.
Yeah,
Like this was not something that I could have produced by working hard.
yeah,
And I kind of referenced Michael Jackson before the program started, and I listened to an interview with him, and the person doing the interviewing asked where a particular part come from, because he had a song that he wanted to write that was going to have a bass lead, and he knew he wanted to do that, and so the interview asked, but where did that bass part come from? And he just said, from above.
yeah. See, I have this theory that true brilliance in any field, like whether it be music or painting or even like science
Yeah.
and mathematics
Mm-hmm.
or something like that, like even the things that we think of as more mental
Yeah.
capacities. But I think true brilliance in any field, somebody who accomplishes it recognizes that it's not him.
Yeah. Right.
It's like
right.
Einstein is a good example of that.
Yeah.
It's like Einstein recognized that these things came to him.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And like that is actually what inspiration means, like in spirit. Like
Yeah, right,
a spirit like breathing into you,
Yeah.
this idea. That's also like what invention.
Yeah. It is. It's
like invention.
Yeah,
It's like
right,
it,
right.
It has come into me.
yeah. Right.
Like that's literally what the word means
Right,
in Old
yeah.
French.
Yeah.
And so it's just like this idea, like brilliance. Somebody who's brilliant is not somebody who like has a superior brain to everybody else
Mm-hmm.
and is just way smarter than anybody else. Somebody who is brilliant is somebody who is in tune with creation.
Mm-hmm.
And like that might sound, if you phrase it wrong, this kind of sounds like this really weird new age wackadoodle nonsense. But that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is what everybody used to say
Yeah. Right.
before the age of reason.
Yeah. Right. And the words that you cited before are examples of that. Like this is what how everybody viewed it. That's why we use the word inspiration. It's because
Yeah.
this was the view. That's why we use the word invention.
Right.
Because this was the view. And Einstein is a really interesting one because he would say like if you don't have
Well, even the word brilliant, and genius.
genius especially.
But like brilliant is like you are illumined.
right.
And genius is like, well, a genius is a spirit.
Right. Yeah. The history of the word genius is pretty interesting.
Yeah. We could talk about the genius of the city of Rome,
Yeah. Right.
for example.
Yeah.
Which is just like the governing spirit.
Yeah. Right. And
Um,
so every person would have a genius.
Yeah.
Which is not the same as saying every person has a guardian angel, but it's kind of similar.
It's similar, and I think like a lot of what's going on in Christianity is like recognizing like, oh, every person in every city does have a genius.
Yeah, right.
It just how happens like they're bad,
Yeah,
and we need to get rid of them.
yeah,
And it's better if that genius is a spirit that's beholding the throne of God,
yeah, right.
which is like, how do we become in tune with spirits?
Well, so you could say like that's the process that you're recommending is for your governing spirit to behold the throne of God.
Yes.
And that's the necessary thing in order for you to write sacred
But
music.
how do you accomplish that? And I think the only way you accomplish that is by you yourself beholding the throne of God.
Yeah, right.
And like I think that is a lot of what's going on in John's vision. It's like he's there beholding the throne of God, but so is the entire host of saints and angels.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like his vision is like he becomes in tune with that. And like he even starts off his vision by pointing that out. It's like I had this vision because I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was already participating in this, and then I got a glimpse of what I was participating in, and so now I'm in touch. This angel can speak to me, this messenger of God, and like Christ Himself can appear to me, because I am attuned properly.
Yeah.
And like this is like that might, so you might wonder, it's like, how do I get that from John? It's like, well, actually you get that from the prophets, and John appears to assume that you're familiar with the prophets,
Mm-hmm.
because he subtly references them constantly in the Revelation.
Well, and also if you would like pour through the scripture and see like who is most beholding the throne of God,
Yeah.
then John would have to be pretty high on your list.
Yes, and I think ultimately, like what I'm trying to say,
I mean, even without the book of Revelation itself, he would still be high
Yeah.
on your list.
what I'm trying to say is that anybody who's brilliant is to a degree doing exactly what John did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you know, and like if you want to write, and like you'll see this.
You get like Moses receiving the pattern of the temple
Mhm.
from heaven, and you can say like that's what a musical composer does properly.
Yeah.
Is receives the pattern of the song.
Well, the patristic tradition of that, with Saint Gregory of Nyssa, is that the pattern of the temple that Moses beheld was actually Christ the Logos,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, oh, that's actually the same thing that we're saying. It's like
Yeah.
what you're beholding is Christ, the Word of God, and like that's the pattern that emerges, and like you might not even realize that's what you're beholding, but like that is what I mean when I'm saying you're beholding the throne of God. Like I think we use this language of the throne of God because you can't look on the face of God and live.
Mm-hmm.
But like you can look on his feet. Like you can look at on his throne where his glory dwells.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what we see. And like I think like the whole aim of our Christian life is to behold the throne of God. And so I guess like what I'm ultimately trying to work out is again this question of what's the difference between a modern composer and an ancient composer, and it might be the sense of self.
I mean, you can almost say that like, well, the goal of the ancient person's life was to behold the throne of God,
Right.
and that's the distinction.
Yeah.
Well, you say you bring the idea of the self in there, but again, I will assert that the modern person wants to behold the self.
Yeah. Well, so it's like, let's go back to the illustration.
Because for a modern person, as we kind of express in other videos, the self stands in the place of God,
Yeah.
and therefore that's what your focus is if you're writing music. I think I've kind of always thought that that all music is worship,
Mhm.
and then with Pajot, like kind of Jonathan Pajot linking worship and attention so much in the way that he does, then I mean this kind of like furthers my thinking in that direction, that like what your attention is on is what you are worshiping,
Yeah.
and music is directing your attention at one thing or another. But for the romantic or for the modern music, what it directs your attention at is this here, you know, like
Yeah.
look inside of yourself and understand yourself, because that's the most important
Yeah.
thing for you to contemplate. Whereas for the ancient person, the most important thing for you to contemplate is God.
Yeah. Yeah, let's go back to the example of Tchaikovsky. It's like Tchaikovsky writes some stunningly beautiful liturgical music,
Mm-hmm.
but there is no way you can believe that Tchaikovsky's goal was beholding the throne of God. Like just look at the manner in which he lived his life. It's like, no. Like not a Christian. Like maybe like outwardly a Christian, but he does not live a Christian life. That's not his priorities. Um, Still writes beautiful music, and music that a lot of people are very happy to use in the liturgy. Like I'm not saying you shouldn't use his music,
Yeah.
but
Well, I think I mean,
but
there's some,
I'm just illustrating. Like here is a very clear example of the different priorities
yeah.
in 19th century music.
I would be only cautious with the judgment just to say like, okay, I mean, how about David?
Mhm.
I mean,
I
you
mean,
could say, look at the way that this guy's living his life.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean the difference is what is repentance,
Yeah.
because it's like David. Yeah, look at the way he's living his life, but then look at what he did about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he's always coming back. Like he loses focus a lot,
Yeah.
but
right.
he always comes back.
Like Johnny Cash. Well, Johnny Cash's last album, which I think was released after he died, or like it could have been like just before he died, but that was his best-selling album, and of his whole career.
Yeah.
And Dad was kind of grumbling about that a little bit because he made all this great music. His important stuff was all from earlier, and that he makes this thing right before he dies, and it's the best-selling thing, and so he just thought there was something like unjust about it. But like if you listen to Johnny Cash's last album, it's like a work of repentance.
Yeah.
I mean, and just like this, I mean, just excellent capstone to his life and his career in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why I bring him up as an example, because you have that repentance as a part of his music.
Yeah.
But I know that's a tangent that kind of wrecked the train.
Yeah, it did. No, but I don't know.
So I'd just be cautious about, like I say, too much condemnation of the individual person, because you have to expect imperfect people to be.
Well, yeah, and that's not what I'm getting at. Like I'm just getting at the point of. I feel like Tchaikovsky is a safe example of somebody who does not have the sort of priorities as the saintly composers of ancient music.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like Hildegard.
Yeah, like Hildegard or Saint Cadman or Saint Romanus the Melodist.
Yeah.
Or a number of other these saints who often, like in their stories, there's a lot of messiness.
Mm-hmm.
But they also like have this transformative experience of God that is where their music comes from.
Yeah.
Like where their beauty comes from. And like I think that's really for me the most important point is, in the Orthodox Church especially, we stress beauty.
Mm-hmm.
Like the liturgy should be beautiful. Your life should be beautiful. The church should be beautiful. We want to make the world beautiful. And yeah, so again, like the liturgy should be as beautiful as we can make it.
Mm-hmm.
But not all beauty is created equal or serves towards the same end. Like sometimes like romantic beauty serves its own end or serves you. And true beauty comes from above and returns to God.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's just like this Aristotelian.
Yeah.
Aristotelian,
right.
like things return to where they came from.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean that. Yeah,
but that is an important concept though, because like if your beauty came from below, that's where it's pointing you.
Yeah.
Or if it just like came from the earth, then it's pointing you to the earth. It's certainly pointing you to earthly things.
I did mention Michael Jackson, but I don't have the sense that his music was returning above.
Yeah.
Anyway. Okay, so I think probably we want to include a little bit of a glimpse of like how do we see this in ancient writers. If we're going to say like there's this sort of genius speaking to these people, genius in the sense of some spirit that's above them in some ways that's speaking to them. In Greek literature, you have like this conventional, well, we call it conventional, invocation to the muses. So if you're Homer or you're Hesiod or whatever, then you're going to begin your work by praying that a spirit, that a muse will come to you, or the muses will come to you and will inspire you. And then you will be able to tell the story in the proper way.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Cadman before, and we've spent some time like working on the story of Cadman, and hopefully we'll be putting out our full animated version of that before too much time goes by.
Or too much time.
Yeah, we put little teaser videos that have a little bit of animation and some music in there, so you can kind of check out the progress of our animated work. But the story of Cadman is that, I mean, just in brief, I won't go through his entire tale, but he has no musical ability. He leaves the party when everybody's playing music, and then in his sleep, or when he lays down to rest, then he's visited by what's just called a man, but what seems to be described as being an angel that comes to visit him and tells him to sing, and he sings under this angel's instruction. And then he wakes up and he's able to remember the song, and then he joins the monastery and devotes the rest of his life to writing sacred music. And we have his song that came from the dream, and we don't have any of his other songs. And so there you have another version of this idea that that I would just say great art. You just so I can include the pagan authors, and not have too Christian of a phrase. But that great art comes from inspiration. That it comes from some sort of divine source. Do you have any other stories you want to add in there that kind of make the same point?
Yeah, I was just looking one up here. Our Orthodox audience is going to know this story pretty well. It's the story of Saint Romanus the Melodist. I just wanted to make sure I have the details right. It's really a similar story. He was a reader in the 6th century in the Byzantine Empire, but he was a very bad reader. And the story is that he was in an all-night vigil service doing the reading, and he did it so poorly that they had to get another reader to come take his place. He's just really bad.
Yeah.
Like, he couldn't sing. Like a reader in an Orthodox church, like, you don't just like read. You chant it.
Yeah.
So he had to be replaced, and then like some of the others were like making fun of him and mocking him. But he was known for his like extreme humility. And then I think it was that same night the Theotokos appears to him and like gives him this blessing. And it's similar to like John in Revelation. She gives him a scroll and then tells him to eat the scroll. And then after this, he has the ability to sing, and he writes the Akathist hymn, which is like one of the most well-known and beloved hymns today in Orthodoxy. And so it's just like this similar idea that his talent is not his own.
Yeah, right.
Which I think is crucial for us to recognize. Like, even if we're somebody who has not had that sort of extreme change where we're going through life incompetent and unable to do the thing that we want to do at all, like, oh, we're a terrible singer, like both of these stories, like we just can't do it, and everybody makes fun of us. I think both these people were ridiculed in their stories, for their lack of ability, it's not always that sort of instant transformation. Sometimes the gift that you received by birth, but it's still a gift. It's still God that gave it to you. Like, he might have delivered it to you through the lineage of your family, but it's still a gift. Like, it's not yours. And like that's a super, super important thing for you to realize, is that every good thing that you have comes from above. And if you have that attitude towards, like, let's say you want to write great music, then I think you have to extend that knowledge to say, like, well, the great music is not going to come from me. It's going to come from it's going to come from above. And so rather than me laboring over the
Like-
lines, instead it should be a meditative act
Mm-hmm.
where I make my heart and my mind and my soul in tune with heaven and with the angels and with the saints, and they inspire us. Like, just, like the inverse is also true. It's like the pagans are in tune with these spirits. Like, and I don't even think all of the spirits that the pagans were in tune with were demons.
Mm-hmm.
They were in tune with spirits. The fact that they were living this demonic way of life means probably most of them were demons. But I think there's plenty of scriptural evidence and evidence from Christian history that like angels can speak to and through pagans.
Yeah.
But also it's like I think it's a misunderstanding of the heavenly hierarchy to think good and bad and everything these demonic spirits is going to be ugly and false. It's like, no, spirits are like the things. I don't know how I want to say this. It's like spirits are like the things that work behind the scenes, the things governing the reality. And like if you're in tune with them, then you're in tune with the real world. And like that's, so there can be beauty. There can be beauty in cultures that are evil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Okay, let's see. So we have this as a pattern in the ancient world and in the medieval world, in the pagan world and in the Christian world, and then we move into our modern world. And like, as you're talking there, I keep thinking of like the musician whose goal is to be the best that there ever was and to have everybody believe that he's the best there ever was. Mm-hmm. And this is really different than the invocation to the muse, or like the song that comes from an angel in a dream. I guess maybe we should just kind of shift and say like, okay, so what then? We said modern people can't make good music. Mm-hmm. What should the modern? I mean, you did say a little bit of this already, but like, what should the approach be for the modern person?
Just pray.
Yeah,
pray a lot. And I mean, it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but like, stop trying so hard. Mm-hmm. Because like in both of these stories that we told, like part of the message of the story is like, these guys were never going to do it.
Yeah.
And as talented as you are, you're never going to do it either. Mm-hmm. And like,
I think most creative people or most songwriters or whatever will also say that that their best works are the ones that they tried the least on.
Yeah. Well, so it's like, I'm going to use the example of myself. Is that I don't want to say this in a way that sounds boastful, but like I'm a very intelligent person, and I have really struggled with that in my life because there's an extreme danger that comes in having any sort of gift, which is pride. Mm-hmm. And like I've always been aware of this because I know lots of people that are so smart that they think themselves into hell. Mm-hmm. And like we all know that sort of person.
Yeah.
And like there's so many heretics that the reason that they're heretics is because they were smarter than everybody else. Mm-hmm. And nobody could answer their heresies, or if they could always work out a solution to still hold on to what they came up with out of their pride. So it's like there's this extreme danger that comes with intelligence. And so that's something that I've always wrestled with, which is like, well, what do I actually do with this intelligence? Because it seems to me that most paths available to me in this world of things that I can do with intelligence are going to destroy my soul. And I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Like I would rather like live in a cave and eat worms,
yeah,
than have that. And finally, the answer to that is you have to realize, you have to eventually come to understand that the highest use of your intellect is to turn it to God and like allow it, instead of channeling itself, to channel Christ and the saints. And it's like that's the highest aim. And so it's like whatever gift you have, it's always the same answer. It's like you can't be self-sufficient in your giftedness. Like there comes to a point where you have to like come to the end of that and realize it's never going to be good enough. Like my own brilliance, like my own intellect is never going to be good enough to actually understand life.
Mm-hmm.
And like you see that, like you see like super brilliant people that just can't function. It's because they're too wrapped up in their brilliance. They're too wrapped up in their minds.
Yeah.
And they construct fantasies about the way they think the world works that is just not real. And so it's the same thing, I think, like if you're musically brilliant, if you're musically gifted, you can make the same mistake.
Yeah, I think that some of the reason that I'm drawn to music is because I think of music as being a kind of spiritual discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a type of participation in music that allows you to release the conscious will.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you can get super technical about music, and you can, if you wanna calculate like what notes you're going to go to and all this stuff, like you can process it in that way, and there's a sense in which like that's a part of your training. So I'm not like, I don't mean to make a like anti-music theory kind of rant. That's not what this is.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have the capacity to release when you're playing music.
Yeah.
And for me, I would say it's very difficult to release. That I always want to be thinking and analyzing and trying to uncover something new. And in playing music, like there are times when I can put myself totally aside, and the reason that I play music is so that I can do that.
Yeah.
And this especially has to do with improvisation. And I don't know if you have comments on that, but for me, like what is desirable is like being able to step into something that is unknown. Mm-hmm. And accept that it's unknown.
Yeah.
And like respond, whatever's happening around you, you find it and you move with it. And so in that sense, it's like you're looking for some spirit from the outside, like.
Yeah. I mean, but let's like, yes, but also understand that is potentially a very dangerous thing.
Yeah.
Like I think there's a reason why so many musicians wind up deranged.
Yeah.
It's because like if you are a truly great musician, it's because you actually are tapping into things.
Mm-hmm.
And those things aren't always good. And like that doesn't mean nobody should be a musician. It just means I mean, I don't know, like for me it always comes back to prayer. It's like those noetic faculties, like you need to make sure they're attuned to the good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
or else
right.
Like this is supremely like for the same reason, like why it's supremely dangerous for me to think that I can just pray to God to reveal to me the truth and then just go with whatever comes.
Mm-hmm.
Like so, like a lot of people do. Mm-hmm. It's like, man, if you're not in tune with God, like if you're not really in tune with God when you do that, like you've got no guarantee that demons aren't going to come in and deceive you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially if all you know how to listen to is demons,
Yeah.
which like is most of us.
Yeah.
Like, that is the condition most of us are in. And I think there's all kinds of ways you can work this out. Like, I don't think like everybody who's writing liturgical music and isn't doing what I say is like being deceived by demons, and then their music is evil because demons wrote it. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I guess it's just more of an explanation of what actually makes great music, and if we can identify what the goals are in music, that will inform what music we choose. Especially for worship. And if we want to compose music, because that's like really what is interesting to me the most, is because I'm interested in composing. Like, I would like to eventually try my hand at composing some liturgical music. And so for me, like, this whole conversation is like a wrestling with the questions that I personally want to wrestle with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
With that in mind.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
is like, how do I actually do that?
Yeah.
Because I'm a product of the modern world.
Mm-hmm.
And I know enough about medieval philosophy to know their philosophy of music is not the same as ours.
Right. Yeah.
And they never would have written the kind of music that we write today.
Yeah. Right.
And like, they would have thought it was disgusting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I like that's a serious question, and especially like if I'm considering like what the goals of this music is to transport people to heaven. And it's ultimately God that does that, and not me. But if I'm writing bad liturgical music, like it's not going to do its job as well as it could.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
And I think that's the way I tend to look at it. Is like, good enough isn't good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it needs to be the best that it can be, and the only way for something to be the best that it can be is for you to come to the end of yourself and like humble yourself. Because again, like, another element of both of those stories, Saint Caedmon and Saint Romanos, is their humility.
Yeah.
Like, their extreme humility.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
And it's like that's what it takes. If you're gonna do great things for the church, it requires extreme humility.
Yeah. I mean, part of the Caedmon story also is that he goes to Abbess Hilda, and he sings for her, and she's got like all the other monks, the scholars and the learned men, all listening to his song to discern, has this come from God? And she wants to know, like, is this a demonic spirit at work, or is this the Spirit of God?
Yeah.
And nobody is willing, neither him nor her nor like anybody else involved in this is willing to say, is willing to leap to the conclusion that this is of God.
Yeah.
Like, there's this kind of complex process of testing the Spirit. You were talking earlier about like not just trusting yourself, or not just thinking like just because something comes to you from the outside that it's a good thing that you should just run with. But I mean, in the case of that story, like, this process of discernment involves a lot of people. We've all got to look at it instead of, again, just like one person making a decision and saying, yeah, I'm just going to run with it. I don't care what anybody else says.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think this is all an interesting conversation. I hope it's as interesting and invaluable for our audience as it is for us. I think it has an application far beyond just music.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also the question of, a lot of people want to be writing new liturgical music.
Yeah, right.
And it's just like, I'm really interested in the question of like, how do you even do that?
Yeah.
Like, and are we aware to the degree to which our musical sensibilities are like messed up?
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, to me, like what you're saying is like they're trying the spirits thoroughly, because like it's like this is a hymn
Mm-hmm.
that
Right,
this guy's written.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not something you take lightly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, I mentioned starting off that I've written lots and lots of music, hundreds of songs, and I kind of describe myself as like, and actually this is what a modern photographer does. This is not what a this is not what photographers in the old days did. But now, if you're a photographer in the digital world, you just take hundreds of pictures anytime you're taking a picture of something and just pick the best one, and then you look like a good photographer. And I kind of feel like that's how some of my songwriting is. And I don't really have songs that I look at that I've written that I don't like, or very few anyways. Maybe there are a couple. But I have songs that I feel like this one here rose up to be everything that it aspired to be. And this one over here, like, it's good, but yet it hasn't like realized the end that it's pointing at. But yeah, when I look at like when I look at the songs that I think they really do what they were supposed to do, then for me, like for what I'm trying to do with music, those are songs that that become like accidentally spiritual songs.
Yeah.
And you know, they will have something to do with ordinary life, but this window will open up in the middle of them. And I don't arrive at that process by labor, you know, like
Right.
I don't think there's ever been a song that like hasn't quite been there, and then I've worked at it until it finally arrived there.
Yeah.
I think there's been lots of them where I've kind of had the idea, I've been running through it, and then like I wind up being totally blown over by something.
Yeah, what I tend to do, like when I'm trying to write songs, like I have like a small handful of songs that I've written that I'll actually like say, I think this is good enough to share.
Yeah.
But usually what'll happen when I'm writing a song is like I'll have like you could say an inspiration. I was like, here's something I want to go with, and I'll start writing it out, and it just like doesn't go where it needs to go. So I'll just stop. It's just like I'm not gonna keep going. This isn't what I want.
Yeah.
This isn't what it. I mean, this isn't what it should be. And then my experience is like if I try to sit down and say like, here's this hymn, now I'm gonna write a setting of music for this. Like it very rarely actually works.
Yeah.
It's just like, this isn't good.
Yeah.
So it's like when I try hard, I'm never satisfied. You know, like to me, it always sounds like I'm trying too hard.
Yeah. To me, I would say that's actually like the idea of taking a hymn and writing a setting of music to it. That's a lot easier to me than what I usually do.
Yeah.
But I would also say it's very much like just an act of listening. You know, like you've got the words in front of you. You already know what those are supposed to be, and sometimes it will change a little bit, depending. Although sometimes I don't allow myself that liberty of changing it. I mean, like if I'm just writing from a scripture passage or something, I'm going to rearrange words so that you know you've got rhythm and rhyme and things. If I'm taking like an existing hymn that's already got that, then I won't change that. But like I say, it's just an act of meditating, just dwelling there with the peace, and it's not me trying to do something.
Yeah. And that generally is my approach, like on any creative thing that I do, is I'll let the thing come to me rather than trying to work it out.
Yeah.
And so it's like anything I was just looking around, like anything I have in this room right now is like a very early essay in the craft of painting. But it's like where I am now, like when I'm painting somebody's face, it's like most of the time is spent just like staring at it, and like it's like, especially if it's like an icon, it's like this is a saint and not just some guy. And what needs to happen is like the saint needs to reveal himself to me, and only then can I paint his face. because like unless I know what he actually looks like,
Yeah.
then I don't know how to paint his face.
Right. Yeah.
And it's the same thing for a song. It's like, well, if I understand that this song is actually coming from heaven, it's like I have to know what the song is before I can actually write it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, because I'm not like I don't see creative things that I'm doing as like I am creating something.
Right. Yeah.
But rather I'm participating with God in creation.
Well, again, for like an ancient or medieval writer or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
they're very unaware of the role that their own self has in the art,
Yeah.
and they don't. I mean, for like we don't know the names of medieval artists.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some medieval authors that we do know their names, but for most we don't. I mean, I think Donatello is like almost the only visual artist whose name that we know.
Yeah.
And again, like when it comes to, yeah, sure. I mean, we know Chaucer's name and we know Dante. I mean, I've got like a book of Middle English lyrics. And just tons of poetry from all kinds of different writers, and we don't know their names, because they're just again like so unaware of the self when they're producing art. And for a modern person, when you produce art, like the whole purpose is to express yourself and like to get other people's attention focused on you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you're gonna win other people's praise and admiration. You're gonna gain glory through your artwork. But that was just would never have occurred to a medieval person.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like it's tempting as an artist to like try to figure out like what is my style and what do I want my paintings to look like or my music to sound like. And like I do that myself a lot. But like I think like really what I should be doing is like what is revealed to me. And that's the highest thing that I can give to you.
Yeah.
Because like if I'm letting myself get in the way, then I'm not right.
Yeah. Yeah, I had somebody ask me, I might have got this a couple of times, somebody asked, like, how did you find your voice, like, as a singer? Because when I sing, and my little thing from Messiah was, like, not really singing. I mean, that's not what I sound like when I sing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like, it took me by surprise to hear that as a question, because, like, it never occurred to me to find my voice.
Yeah, right.
I'm just singing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, but that's like again like a very very modern focus is like, who am I, and I'm gonna find who I am. I mean, once again, the object of your contemplation is yourself. If you're a modern composer, who am I? What am I going to say? What is my image going to be? What's my voice going to be?
Yeah.
And you actually like. You're going to express yourself more, I think, by not paying any attention to that at all, by being totally unaware of it. I think if someone is trying to answer those questions, then what they're trying to do is they're trying to come up with what is the lie that I'm going to say about myself,
right,
so that other people will believe it.
Yeah.
That's what self-expression is, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. I agree. I think I'd like to wrap up this conversation.
Okay.
I think it's been a good conversation.
Yeah.
There's a lot more we could say. It's probably been like an intellectually intense conversation.
People probably can't handle anymore.
Probably not. That's what I'm saying. Our audience is weak.
Oh boy. I like them. Okay. Yeah. Any closing words?
No, not necessarily. Other than just like this is a conversation. Rather than, I mean, like as usual for us, it's not. You're saying like, this is what's right, and you need to agree with us. It's just for me, this is like an interesting personal question because it's something that I'm personally like exploring myself, and I thought it'd be worthwhile to
Yeah.
like have that conversation, like I guess publicly.
Yeah. Yeah, I would just in closing, I would just add one other thing. I was talking about this sort of like receptive spirit in playing music, where I can stop striving, I can stop trying to analyze and figure things out, and I can just connect with what's happening. And you said this conversation has more to do with it's about more than just music. It applies to things beyond music. For me, the reason why I like that in music is because I want that to be the way that I live my life.
Right.
And I want like my participation in music to transform me into the sort of person that is more receptive, and less imposing my will on the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like in my perspective, religious perspective, like that's what you're trying to do as a Christian,
Yeah.
is to lay down your own life.
Well, then it is like my thought. Yeah, it's like my thought when you're saying that. It's like, well, then you just need like to develop as much as it's possible for you or for me, like the discipline of like hesychastic prayer.
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
is like, like shut your mind up.
right, yeah.
Like stop all the noise.
Yeah, and I keep using the term contemplation in here, which I'm using because of its like connection with Christian meditation.
Yeah.
It's like that's the prescription. If you're the musical composer, then what you do is you contemplate God.
Yeah.
And also like if you're a person and you want your life to be beautiful,
Yeah.
then it's like the object of your contemplation is what leads to that.
Yeah. And it's like, like for me, like going back to me talking about myself, is that like my like the way my mind is like it can be so full of thoughts, that like orthodoxy is supremely useful and helpful for me, because the only thing that actually works for me is like I can't stop thinking. Like it's just not something that I can do.
Yeah.
And instead, like the intellect needs to be turned in the right in this right direction.
Yeah.
And then like if all those little voices in my mind are like turned and focused in the right direction, then there's order.
Yeah. Right. Right. Which is like that's the goal of classical music or
Right.
Traditional music. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and so for me, like that really deeply informs my thinking. It's like, oh, like this is my experience of my own cosmos, my own microcosmos.
Right.
Like I am a microcosmos. It's like I think that's true of the world.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I would say also like outside of performing music, or I say performing, but playing. I mean, although I like performing more than I like playing by myself, because I want music to be shared with people.
Yeah.
I want it to exist in community and not just in my bedroom or whatever.
Yeah.
But so in playing music, then I have this feeling of release, and I would say like the other place probably where I've experienced that most strongly is in Orthodox Divine Liturgy.
Yeah.
And this kind of stillness of the mind that I don't achieve at other places. Like I can go into that and I can sit and I can release, and I can have this experience of peace that I don't have access to elsewhere in life.
Yeah, it's like what I was thinking was I can't have stillness and order in my thinking by tyrannically imposing it.
Yeah.
And like
right.
lots of people
Right.
have tried to do that. Like with me in the past, it's like you need to just stop thinking, or you need to stop worrying about this, or you need to do this, or you need to do that, or I don't understand why this is so hard. Like all these kinds of things. It's like this tyrannical imposition of order. It's like, well, that doesn't work. The only thing that actually brings about order is for all of those things to be in harmony with God. And like that's the same thing I think for the world. It's like the only way for all of these voices in the world to be in harmony isn't like the tyrannical imposition of order.
Yeah, right.
It's
Yeah,
they all need to be turned towards God,
yeah.
and then order just naturally exists. Harmony just naturally exists.
Okay, well, I think we'll close it with that.
Yeah, that's a good place.
All right. Thanks again for listening.